This is the story of Peter Pan, told for bedtime sleep. If you use this stories to sleep, I want you to give it a thumbs up and comment where you were listening from. Let's begin. Chapter 1. In London, the Darling family sleeps while moonlight rests gently on the nursery windows. Wendy, John, and little Michael dream of faraway skies. Each night, Wendy tells stories of pirates, mermaids, and boys who never grow up. Her voice fills the room with wonder, painting pictures in the darkness that feel more real than the walls around them. One night, a soft laugh echoes by the window. It is the kind of laugh that sounds like wind chimes and distant bells, young and free and endless. A boy's shadow slips inside through the crack beneath the window frame, moving like water across the wooden floor. The shadow dances on the wall, stretching and bending in ways that ordinary shadows never do. Wendy wakes to the sound of something rustling near her dresser. She sits up slowly, rubbing her eyes, thinking she must still be dreaming. But there, tangled in her curtains, is a real shadow trying to escape back through the window. And chasing it is a boy dressed in leaves and determination, with wild hair and eyes that sparkle like they have never known sadness. The boy turns and sees Wendy watching him. He grins without embarrassment, as if being caught in a stranger's bedroom in the middle of the night is the most natural thing in the world. He introduces himself as Peter Pan and explains that he has lost his shadow and it ran away to this very room. His voice carries music in it, light and careless, like someone who has never had to worry about tomorrow. A tiny light zips around his head, glowing like a small, angry star. This is Tinkerbell, Peter explains, his fairy friend who helps him fly. The light makes an irritated jingling sound, clearly annoyed at being introduced. Wendy watches in amazement as this impossible scene unfolds in her ordinary nursery. Peter finally catches his shadow and tries to stick it back onto his feet using soap from Wendy's wash basin. When that fails, he sits down and begins to cry, frustrated tears that seem strange coming from someone so confident. Wendy, being kind and practical, offers to sew his shadow back on properly. She threads a needle and carefully stitches the shadow to Peter's shoes while he tells her about the place he comes from. He speaks of an island called Neverland, where children never grow old and adventures happen every single day. There are mermaids who sing in lagoons, pirates who sail under black flags, and fairies who live in flowers. Most importantly, there are no schools, no bedtimes, and no one telling you what you must do. It is a place, Peter says, where dreams never fade and morning never forces you to forget the magic of night. Wendy listens with her heart beating faster. She has told stories about places like this, but she never imagined they might be real. Peter notices the hunger in her eyes, that deep wish that lives in everyone who has ever wanted to escape into their own imagination. He asks if she would like to come to Neverland, to see it for herself and tell stories to the lost boys who live there with him. Before Wendy can answer, her brothers John and Michael wake up, drawn by the sound of voices. They see Peter and immediately recognize him from Wendy's stories. They clamor with questions, wanting to know if pirates are real, if you can really fly, if adventures taste as sweet as they sound in fairy tales. Peter laughs at their excitement and says they can all come if they wish, but they must learn to fly first. Tinkerbell sprinkles fairy dust over the three children, the golden powder falling like tiny stars onto their shoulders and hair. Peter tells them to think happy thoughts, the lightest and brightest thoughts they can imagine. Wendy thinks of her mother's smile. John thinks of sailing ships. Michael thinks of the toy bear waiting on his bed. And slowly, impossibly, their feet lift off the floor. They float upward like dandelion seeds on a breeze, laughing with pure joy and disbelief. Peter catches their hands and guides them toward the open window. They glide through it and out into the night sky, leaving behind the safe, familiar world of nurseries and bedtimes and rules. Below them, London spreads out like a map made of lights, growing smaller with every heartbeat. They rise higher, passing chimneys and church steeples, moving beyond the clouds where the air tastes clean and cold. The moon watches them climb toward it, huge and welcoming. Stars multiply above them, more stars than they ever knew existed, each one bright enough to wish upon. Peter points the way forward, toward the second star to the right, and tells them to follow until morning. And as the city shrinks below, the stars begin to whisper, "Welcome home."
Chapter 2. The children soar over silver clouds toward a horizon painted in dawn colors. The flight feels like swimming through silk, effortless and free. Wendy's nightgown billows around her like wings. John pretends he is a ship's captain, navigating by the stars. Michael giggles and loops through the air, drunk on the magic of movement without ground beneath him. Peter leads them onward with the confidence of someone who has made this journey 1,000 times. He points out constellations and names them with his own words, not the names that scientists use, but the names that make sense to him. That cluster there is the laughing giant. Those 3 in a row are the dancing sisters. That bright one is the eye that never blinks. Time behaves strangely during their flight. Hours might be passing, or only minutes. The sky changes colors like a painting being created around them. Purples melting into pinks, melting into golds. Wendy asked how much farther it is to Neverland, and Peter says it depends. The island moves, he explains. Some nights it is close, and some nights it is far. Tonight, it is waiting for them, eager to have visitors. Peter points down to the sparkling sea below. That is Neverland, he says, where dreams take form and become solid enough to touch. Wendy peers down through the wisps of cloud and sees an island shaped like a sleeping dragon, covered in green forests and ringed with white beaches. Rivers catch the early light and shine like silver ribbons laid across the land. Mountains rise in the center, mysterious and inviting. They descend through soft mist that tastes like morning dew. The air grows warmer as they drop lower, carrying scents of flowers and salt water and something indefinable that might be magic itself. They land among glowing trees whose leaves shimmer with colors that have no names, colors that exist only in this place where imagination rules. Everything hums with quiet wonder. The rivers do indeed sing, soft, gurgling melodies that sound almost like words if you listen carefully. Flowers whisper secrets to each other, gossiping about the new arrivals. Birds with feathers like rainbows watch from branches, curious but unafraid. The ground feels springy and alive under their feet, as if the island itself is breathing. Wendy spins around slowly, trying to see everything at once. She has never been anywhere so beautiful and strange. John immediately starts exploring, picking up unusual stones and examining odd plants. Michael chases after a butterfly that glitters like a jewel, laughing when it leads him in circles. Peter watches them all with satisfaction, pleased to share his home with people who appreciate its wonders. But somewhere far away, Across the singing rivers and whispering trees, a ship creaks in the bay. Its dark hull rocks gently on the tide, and its tattered sails snap in the breeze. On its deck, a man stands at the wheel, even though the ship is anchored. He is elegant and dangerous, dressed in fine clothes that have seen better days, with long dark hair and eyes that have forgotten how to truly smile. This is Captain Hook, and he stirs in his sleep even though his eyes are open. Something has changed in the air, some shift in the island's energy that tells him what he already suspected. Peter Pan has returned, and with Peter comes the possibility of the one thing Hook desires most, the thing he can never quite name but always hunts for. Perhaps it is revenge, perhaps it is peace, perhaps it is simply an ending to the endless game they play. Hook's hand, the one made of cold iron that replaced the hand Peter fed to the crocodile, tightens on the ship's wheel. His lips move in a whisper that sounds like a prayer or a curse. The crew sleeps below decks, unaware that their captain stands watch in the pre-dawn light, staring toward the shore where he knows Peter has landed. Far below the ship, in the deep green water, something ancient and patient swims in slow circles. The crocodile that ate Hook's hand has been following him ever since, drawn by the taste of that first meal. Inside the crocodile's belly, a clock ticks steadily, swallowed long ago from some unfortunate sailor. The sound marks time in a place where time usually forgets to matter. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock counts seconds that might be years or might be moments. The sound of a ticking clock begins to echo across the water, faint but unmistakable.
Chapter 3. Peter brings Wendy, John, and Michael to his home under the roots of an enormous tree. The entrance is hidden beneath a canopy of moss and ferns, marked only by a hollow that looks like dozens of other hollows scattered through the forest. Peter shows them how to slide down through the narrow opening, tumbling through darkness that smells like earth and safety, landing on soft piles of leaves at the bottom. The underground home is larger than seems possible. Torches made from glowing fungi light the space with gentle amber light. The walls are packed earth held up by massive tree roots that curve like the ribs of some great beast. Hammocks hang from the ceiling, and rough furniture carved from driftwood fills the spaces between root and stone. It is cozy despite its strangeness, a place that feels lived in and loved. The lost boys welcome them with shouts of excitement. There are 6 of them, ranging in age from quite small to nearly as old as Wendy. They wear clothes made from animal skins and leaves, and their hair is wild and tangled. Their names are Slightly, Toodles, Nibs, Curly, and the Twins, though the twins insist they are completely different people, despite looking identical. They crowd around the new arrivals, asking 100 questions at once. Peter announces that Wendy has come to be their mother and tell them stories. The Lost Boys cheer at this news. They have heard of mothers from Peter's descriptions, though none of them can quite remember having their own. They know mothers are people who tuck you in and tell you everything will be fine and somehow make it true just by saying it. The idea of having a mother, even temporarily, fills them with a happiness they cannot fully explain. Wendy feels both honored and nervous about this role. She is only a child herself, not much older than some of the Lost Boys, but she sees the hope in their eyes, the hunger for someone to care about them the way families care for each other. She decides she will try her best to give them what they need, at least for a little while. That first evening, after John and Michael have been shown around and fed a dinner of roasted fish and strange fruits, the Lost Boys gather around Wendy. They sit in a circle, their faces turned up toward her like flowers following the sun. The underground home grows quiet, except for the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of night insects singing above ground. Wendy begins to tell them a story. Her gentle voice fills the cave with warmth, wrapping around each listener like a blanket. She tells them about a family who lived in a house by the sea, about children who found treasure wraps and sailed to distant islands, about a mother who waited at home with the light in the window burning through every dark night until her children returned safely. The Lost Boys listen as if they have never heard anything so wonderful. Some of them close their eyes, the better to see the pictures Wendy's words paint in their imaginations. Slightly sighs deeply when she describes the mother's love. Toodles wipes his eyes when she talks about coming home. Even Peter, who usually fidgets during anything that requires sitting still, remains motionless and attentive. When the story ends, Wendy tucks each boy into his hammock, smoothing imaginary blankets and brushing hair back from foreheads the way she has seen her own mother do. She tells them good night and sweet dreams, words that feel almost like spells in this magical place. The boys smile and close their eyes, drifting towards sleep with peaceful expressions they rarely wear during daylight. As Wendy watches them sleep, she wonders if dreams can live forever here in Neverland. Everything else seems eternal. The island never ages, Peter never grows up, the adventures apparently never end. But can feelings last forever too? Can the warmth of family and the safety of love exist without the passage of time to give them meaning? She is not sure of the answer, but in this moment, watching these strange wild boys sleep like ordinary children, it seems possible. But in the quiet after her last word, the forest above whispers a response that only she half hears. Not all who dream stay forever. The words drift down through the tree roots like autumn leaves falling. Wendy shivers slightly, though the underground home is warm. She tells herself it is only the wind making sounds that happen to resemble speech. But somewhere deep inside, she knows the island is trying to tell her something important.
Chapter 4. The children explore Neverland in the days that follow, discovering new wonders everywhere they turn. They meet mermaids lounging on rocks in a crystal lagoon, their long hair draped over scales that shine like opals. The mermaids are beautiful, but cold, singing songs that make you want to swim out to them, even though you know the water is deep and dangerous. They laugh at the children's questions and answer only in riddles, then disappear beneath the waves without warning. They encounter fairies dancing in clearings where mushrooms grow in perfect circles. The fairies are tiny and quick, darting through the air too fast to see clearly, leaving trails of colored light behind them. Tinkerbell acts as translator, though she clearly finds the other fairies silly and beneath her notice. The forest fairies giggle at everything and play tricks, tying shoelaces together and hiding important things where they cannot be found. John becomes fascinated by the moonlight lagoons that dot the island. The water in these pools glows with its own light, bright enough to read by even on the darkest night. Strange fish with transparent bodies swim through them, and plants that only bloom after sunset grow along their edges. John spends hours studying these pools, trying to understand their magic through logic and observation, which makes Peter laugh because magic, Peter insists, does not follow rules. Michael makes friends with the animals that live in Neverland. The wolves that hunt in packs allow him to pet them as if they were dogs. Birds land on his shoulders and eat from his hands. Even the wild pigs, usually dangerous and quick to anger, let Michael scratch their bristly backs. The animals recognize something in Michael that they trust, some innocence that even this magical place has not quite spoiled. Wendy finds joy in the dreamlike rhythm of the island. Days blend together without the structure of clocks and schedules. She wakes when sunlight filters down through the tree roots, sleeps when tiredness overtakes her, and fills the hours between with exploration and stories and laughter. There is a freedom in this lack of routine that she has never experienced before. No one tells her what she must do or how she should behave. She simply exists, moment by moment, following her curiosity wherever it leads. But sometimes she sees shadows move where no one walks. Dark shapes slip between trees just at the edge of her vision, gone when she turns to look directly at them. The shadows do not feel threatening exactly, but they feel wrong, like things that do not belong in a place of light and dreams. When she mentions this to Peter, he waves away her concerns with easy confidence. Dreams have shadows too, Peter tells her. Everything that exists casts a shadow, even things that are not quite real. The shadows are just part of Neverland, he explains. Nothing to worry about. They have always been here, moving through the forests and swimming in the deep waters, reflections of all the dark thoughts and fears that children bring with them when they visit the island. As long as you do not pay attention to them, Peter says, they cannot hurt you. Wendy wants to believe him, but she finds herself noticing the shadows more and more. They seem to grow larger as the days pass, or perhaps she simply becomes better at seeing them. They cluster in the dark spaces between trees, pool in the corners of the underground home when night falls, and ripple across the surface of calm waters. She catches herself watching them, trying to understand what they want or why they linger. The stars above Neverland sometimes blink like watchful eyes, Wendy realizes, during one clear night when she cannot sleep. She lies in her hammock, staring up through a gap in the roots at the sky beyond. The stars are too bright here, too aware. They seem to lean closer when she looks at them, curious about the girl from London who has come to visit their island. She wonders if the stars judge her somehow, if they know secrets about Neverland that Peter will not share. One star in particular catches her attention, a red one that pulses like a beating heart. It hangs low on the horizon, positioned above where she knows the pirate ship must be anchored. The red light seems to pulse in rhythm with something, though she cannot tell what. A thought? A heart? A warning? Wendy watches the red star until her eyes grow heavy and sleep finally claims her. And from far beyond the waves, as she drifts toward dreams, a ship's lantern answers her thought. The light swings in the darkness, red and steady, marking the position of the Jolly Roger where Captain Hook stands watch through another sleepless night.
Chapter 5. Aboard the Jolly Roger, Captain Hook dreams restlessly, even when his eyes remain open.
Sleep, when it comes, brings no peace. His dreams are filled with ticking sounds, and the flash of a boy's smile, and the splash of something hitting water, followed by terrible pain. He wakes gasping, reaching for the hand that is no longer there, touching instead cold metal fashioned into the shape of a hook. Hook is elegant, despite his circumstances, a gentleman pirate who wears lace at his cuffs and keeps his hair carefully groomed. His clothes are fine, though they show wear from years at sea. His cabin is decorated with stolen treasures, beautiful things that he no longer truly sees. Books line the shelves, but he cannot focus enough to read them. A harpsichord sits in the corner, but music sounds wrong to him now, all the melodies haunted by that endless ticking. He is weary in a way that has nothing to do with physical exhaustion. His weariness lives in his bones and settles behind his eyes, the kind of tiredness that comes from playing the same game too long without being allowed to stop. He has chased Peter Pan across this island for more years than he can count, fighting battles that end without resolution, dying deaths that do not stick, living through adventures that circle back to their beginnings. The crocodile haunts him, that ancient, patient beast that tasted his flesh and now hunts him ceaselessly. Hook hears its clock ticking even when it swims far away, the sound echoing in his mind like a heartbeat that is not his own. Tick-tock, tick-tock, counting down to an ending that never quite arrives. The crocodile has learned patience that Hook lacks. It knows that eventually, inevitably, Hook will slip or tire or simply give in, and then the beast will have the rest of him. His crew snores below decks, rough men who would be terrifying anywhere except here on Neverland, where more fearsome things lurk in the forests. Hook's pirates are loyal enough, but loyalty on a ship of villains means something different than it does in the civilized world. They follow him because he is more dangerous than they are, because he knows the island's secrets, and because mutiny on Neverland tends to end badly for mutineers. The island punishes those who break its unspoken rules. But Hook cannot sleep, even though exhaustion pulls at him. He stands at the ship's wheel in the dark hours before dawn, his good hand gripping worn wood while his hook rests on the rail. He stares toward the shore, where green hills meet starlit sky, knowing without being told that Peter has returned. He can feel the boy's presence like a change in air pressure before a storm. He remembers the day Peter took his hand, though the memory has become confused over time. Did he fall? Was he pushed? Did the crocodile simply appear at the perfect moment, jaws open, ready to receive the gift Peter offered it? The details blur together. What remains clear is the laughter. Peter had laughed, that bright, careless sound that Hook hears in his nightmares, finding joy in violence the way only someone who has never truly suffered can. Hook whispers to himself in the silence, his voice barely audible over the creaking of the ship and the gentle splash of waves. If the boy never grows old, he asks the darkness, why do I still remember? Peter remains unchanged, eternally young and thoughtless and free. But Hook remembers every battle, every defeat, every humiliation. The years accumulate inside him, even though they do not show on the outside. He carries time's weight while Peter floats above it, untouchable and light. Sometimes Hook wonders what would happen if he simply sailed away, left Neverland behind, returned to the real world where time moves forward honestly and endings exist. But he knows the truth that Peter does not. There is no leaving this place. Not really. The island holds them all in its web of story and magic. They are characters playing roles, and the play must continue. Villain and hero, darkness and light, age and youth, locked in eternal opposition. He gazes at his hook, the cruel curved metal that has replaced something warm and living. In certain lights, it looks almost beautiful, gleaming like silver moonlight. He has learned to use it as a weapon, slicing through rope and canvas, threatening his crew into obedience. But it is still a cold, dead thing attached to his body, a constant reminder of what he has lost and who took it from him. The sky begins to lighten, night fading toward dawn in shades of deep blue and purple. Hook remains at his post, watching and waiting. He knows Peter will come eventually. The boy cannot resist a good fight, cannot ignore a villain who needs defeating. It is the nature of their relationship, the gravity that pulls them together again and again. Hook wishes things could be different, but wishing changes nothing in Neverland. Here, stories follow their patterns, and characters fulfill their functions, and the wheel turns endlessly. And somewhere beneath the ship, deep in the dark water, the crocodile smiles, if crocodiles can smile. It surfaces briefly, its eyes reflecting starlight, then sinks down again to resume its patient vigil. Inside its belly, the clock continues its steady rhythm. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Time marches on for some creatures, even in a place where time supposedly stands still.
Chapter 6. Wendy and the boys wander too far into the forest one evening, chasing fireflies that hum like lullabies. The tiny lights dance ahead of them, just out of reach, pulsing in patterns that seem almost like signals or messages. The children laugh and run, pushing through ferns and ducking under low branches, not paying attention to direction or distance. The game fills their minds completely, leaving no room for caution or common sense. But gradually, they begin to notice changes in their surroundings. The woods shift in subtle ways that are hard to define. Paths that were straight develop curves. Trees that stood to the left appear on the right. The air grows thicker, heavier, like moving through a dream half forgotten. The familiar landmarks vanish, replaced by twisted roots and mossy stones that look the same in every direction. The trees themselves seem to sigh, their leaves rustling with sounds that could be words if you listened carefully enough. The children slow down, then stop, suddenly aware that they are lost. Even John, who prided himself on remembering the way back to Peter's underground home, cannot find anything he recognizes. Michael starts to look worried, his earlier excitement draining away. Wendy takes both boys' hands, trying to project confidence she does not quite feel. They hear distant music drifting through the trees, the sound of rough voices singing in the creak of wood and rope. It is a sailor's song, the kind that speaks of rum and treasure and the freedom of the open sea. The sound carries clearly through the strange stillness of the forest. Hook's men must be celebrating something, Wendy realizes, which means the pirate ship cannot be far away. But which direction is the sound coming from? It seems to shift, now ahead, now behind, now echoing from multiple directions at once. Peter appears suddenly, dropping from a tree branch with the silence of a cat. His face is serious, lacking its usual playful grin. He tells them urgently to come back, to follow him away from this part of the forest. When Wendy asks why, Peter hesitates before answering. This is the border between territories, he explains, the place where his land meets Hook's hunting grounds. It is dangerous to linger here, especially after dark. His voice, usually so bright and careless, carries a strange edge. There is something sharp beneath his words, something that makes Wendy think of knives hidden under silk. For the first time, she sees Peter not as an eternal child, but as something else, something that wears childhood like a costume, but might be ancient and unknowable underneath. It is as if the dream itself had teeth. Peter leads them quickly through the forest, taking a winding route that doubles back on itself several times. He moves with absolute certainty despite the darkness and the confusing terrain. The singing grows louder, then softer, then fades completely. Other sounds emerge to replace it, the call of night birds, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, the whisper of wind through leaves that sounds almost like breathing. They emerge into a clearing where moonlight pools like water. Peter tells them to rest here for a moment while he scouts ahead to make sure the path is clear. He vanishes into the trees before anyone can object, moving so quickly and quietly that it seems almost like magic. The children huddle together in the center of the clearing, feeling exposed and vulnerable under the watching moon. John tries to make a joke about getting lost, but it falls flat. Michael asks when they can go home to the underground tree, his voice small and tired. Wendy hugs him close and promises it will be soon. She looks around the clearing, studying the shadows that pool beneath the trees. Something feels wrong about this place, though she cannot identify what exactly troubles her. Then she notices the fireflies have followed them. They hover at the edge of the clearing, their lights pulsing in unison now, rather than the random patterns from before. One by one, they begin to move closer, forming a circle around the children. Their glow seems less cheerful than it did earlier, more like the cold light of deep-sea creatures or the foxfire that grows on rotting wood. When the children turn around, preparing to run, they realize that one of the fireflies is not light at all. It is an eye, unblinking and aware, watching them from the darkness between the trees. The eye blinks slowly, deliberately, and then is joined by another eye, and another, until a dozen pairs of eyes surround the clearing. They glow with their own internal light, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. Chapter 7. Time begins to behave oddly after that night in the forest, though perhaps it had always been strange in Neverland, and the children are only now noticing. Days stretch and compress like taffy being pulled. Morning lasts for what feels like hours, or passes in minutes depending on nothing the children can understand. Afternoon spirals into evening without sunset, or sunset lingers for ages without quite committing to night. Wendy tries to count the days since they arrived, but the numbers refuse to stay straight in her head. Has it been a week? 2 weeks? A month? When she asks John and Michael, they give completely different answers. And when she asks Peter, he laughs and says time does not work that way here. Time is flexible in Neverland, bending around adventures and straightening during boring moments. You have as much time as you need, Peter explains, until suddenly you do not. But the ticking sound follows them everywhere now. At first, Wendy thinks she imagines it, a faint rhythm at the edge of hearing, so quiet it might just be her own heartbeat, or the pulse of blood in her ears. But the sound persists and grows gradually louder. Tick-tock, tick-tock, steady and relentless as a metronome counting out measures of something precious being spent. The lost boys hear it too. They grow nervous and fidgety, glancing over their shoulders at nothing. Slightly starts counting his steps aloud as he walks, trying to match the rhythm of the ticking, or perhaps trying to drown it out. Toodles covers his ears sometimes,
but admits it does not help because the sound comes from inside as much as outside. Even Peter, who claims nothing in Neverland frightens him, seems more alert and tense. It is not just the crocodile, Wendy realizes as she lies awake one night listening to the omnipresent ticking. The crocodile's clock is part of it, yes, but the sound comes from everywhere and nowhere, from the earth itself and the sky above and the air between. It is time itself trying to find them, trying to catch up with people who've been dodging it for too long. Neverland might be a place where children do not grow old, but time still exists here. It simply moves in spirals rather than straight lines. Wendy wanders to the edge of the underground home and climbs up to ground level, needing to see the sky. The stars wheel overhead in their familiar patterns, but they seem to move faster than stars should, completing their nightly journey in hours rather than the slow, majestic rotation she remembers from London. Or perhaps they move slower, so slowly that watching them makes her dizzy. She cannot tell which perception is true or if both are true simultaneously. She begins to understand something that frightens her. Neverland is not endless. It is not an escape from time, but a trap inside it. The island forms a circle, and everything that happens here happens again and again. Peter fights Hook, Hook loses, Hook returns. Children arrive, play, and eventually leave or stay, and new children arrive to replace them. The adventures repeat with minor variations. Nothing truly changes because change requires time to flow forward, and time here moves in spirals rather than straight lines. Wendy wanders to the edge of the underground home and climbs up to ground level, needing to see the sky. The stars wheel overhead in their familiar patterns, but they seem to move faster than stars should, completing their nightly journey in hours rather than the slow, majestic rotation she remembers from London. Or perhaps they move slower, so slowly that watching them makes her dizzy. She cannot tell which perception is true or if both are true simultaneously. She begins to understand something that frightens her. Neverland is not endless. It is not an escape from time, but a trap inside it. The island forms a circle, and everything that happens here happens again and again. Peter fights Hook, Hook loses, Hook returns. Children arrive, play, and eventually leave or stay, and new children arrive to replace them. The adventures repeat with minor variations. Nothing truly changes because change requires time to flow forward, and time here moves in spirals rather than straight lines. Peter does not understand this or chooses not to. He only knows that he must keep moving, keep flying, keep playing, stay ahead of something he cannot name. If he stops, even for a moment, the thing chasing him might catch up. He treats life as an endless game because to him it is endless. He cannot imagine an ending, cannot conceive of a finale where the curtain falls and the players take their bows and go home. But Wendy can imagine endings. She is starting to see them everywhere. The way flowers bloom and wilt in accelerated cycles. The way trees lose leaves that immediately grow back. The way the moon passes through all its phases in a single night before resetting to full. Every ending contains its own beginning here, and every beginning carries the seeds of its ending. The snake eats its own tail eternally. She sits beneath a tree and closes her eyes, listening to the ticking that permeates everything. In her mind, she sees clocks scattered across Neverland like seeds buried in the ground and growing like strange flowers. Each clock marks time differently, racing or crawling or stopping entirely. Together, they create a rhythm that underlies the island's magic, the heartbeat of a place that pretends time does not exist while being completely defined by its resistance to temporal flow. And in that hush before dawn, as Wendy sits thinking about time and endings and circles that cannot be broken, the sound returns louder than before. One soft tick, then another. The rhythm quickens, demanding acknowledgement. Somewhere in the island's heart, something ancient begins to wake.
Chapter 8. One evening, Wendy tells a story about her mother waiting by the open window. The lost boys settle around her as usual, but tonight the atmosphere feels different, heavier with emotion. Wendy's voice carries longing she cannot hide as she describes her home in London, the nursery with its familiar shadows, the warmth of her mother's embrace. She tells them about mothers who remember every scraped knee they ever bandaged, every nightmare they ever chased away. She describes how mothers count their children at night to make sure everyone is safe, how they worry when children are late coming home, how they keep lights burning in windows so children can always find their way back. Her voice trembles slightly as she realizes how desperately she misses these things. The lost boys grow quiet. Their usual fidgeting and whispered comments stop entirely. Even Peter listens, his eyes distant and troubled. Slightly wipes tears from his cheeks without seeming to notice he is crying. Toodles hugs his knees to his chest, making himself small. The twins lean against each other for comfort. Nib stares at nothing, lost in thoughts of things he barely remembers or perhaps never had. "Do you think she still waits?" Peter asks softly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. The question hangs in the air like mist. He is asking about Wendy's mother specifically, but he is also asking something larger, something about all the mothers who might have waited for boys who never came home. Do they give up eventually? Do they stop hoping? Or does love persist even when logic says it should fade? Wendy says yes without hesitation. Yes, her mother still waits. She knows this with a certainty that comes from deep in the heart, the place where hope lives even when evidence suggests otherwise. Her mother keeps the window open every night, keeps the nursery ready, keeps believing her children will return. A mother's love does not understand surrender. It endures because it must, because giving up would mean admitting something too terrible to accept. The island seems to sigh at her words, as if Neverland itself feels the weight of this truth. The trees rustle without wind. The underground home's walls creak. The torches flicker in unison. And above, though the children cannot see it, the stars shimmer like tears being held back. The entire island trembles with an emotion it rarely allows itself to feel, something too close to sadness and loss. Peter looks away from Wendy, his face twisting with feelings he does not know how to process. He has spent eternity being carefree, avoiding anything that might weigh him down. But in this moment, hearing about a mother who waits faithfully for children who might never return, something cracks inside his carefully maintained joy. He sees suddenly what he has always refused to see, the cost of his choices. "Maybe you should go back," Peter says quietly, the words clearly painful for him. "Maybe you should return before you forget the way. before too much time passes and your mother stops believing, before the window closes and cannot be opened again. He does not look at the children as he says this, cannot bear to see the relief and guilt that must be showing on their faces. Wendy feels a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of her wants to leap at this chance, to say yes immediately and start preparing for the journey home. But another part feels torn, because leaving means abandoning these lost boys who have come to depend on her stories and her care. It means saying goodbye to Peter, who clearly needs her in ways he cannot admit. It means walking away from magic and wonder and returning to ordinary life. John and Michael exchange glances, having a silent conversation only siblings can manage. They are ready to go home, Wendy realizes, though they will never say it first. They miss their parents, their comfortable beds, the predictable rhythm of days measured by clocks and calendars. The adventure has been wonderful, but they are tired in ways that sleep on Neverland cannot fix. The lost boys look at Wendy with expressions that break her heart. They understand what is happening. They have seen it before with other children who came and eventually left. Slightly asks if she will forget them once she returns to London. Will the memory of these strange wild boys fade like dreams do in morning light? Will she tell stories about them to her own children someday, or will they become too unreal to speak about? Wendy promises she will never forget, and she means it with her whole heart. But even as she speaks, she feels the first threads of forgetting beginning their work. Already the edges of certain memories feel fuzzy. How long exactly had they been here? What did she eat for breakfast yesterday? The details slip away like water through fingers, and she understands with sudden clarity that this is how Neverland protects itself. It lets you remember the feeling of magic while obscuring the specifics, until eventually you can't quite prove to yourself that any of it was real. Peter stands abruptly and walks to the edge of the underground home, his back to everyone. His shoulders are tight with tension. When he speaks, his voice sounds young and lost in a way Wendy has never heard before. He tells them about his own mother, how he left her long ago to live with the fairies. He went back once, he says, after a very long time, but the window was parred and another little boy slept in his bed. His mother had another son, a replacement because she stopped believing Peter would return. The story falls into the silence like a stone into deep water, sending ripples through everyone who hears it. This is why Peter never goes home, why he encourages other children to stay forever, why he pretends time doesn't matter. He cannot go back, so he surrounds himself with children who choose not to go back, building a family from those who, like him, have nowhere else to belong. But Wendy is different, Peter continues. Her mother still waits. Her window remains open. She has not been replaced. She has a home to return to, which means she should return before that changes. His voice cracks slightly on the word should, revealing how much the suggestion costs him. He is choosing her happiness over his own need for her, and the sacrifice tears at him visibly. For the first time, the word home felt heavier than flight, and the weight of it was both burden and blessing, pulling them back toward the world where time moves forward and children eventually grow up and windows wait for those who left to come home again. The children sit together in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire burns low, casting long shadows that dance on the earthen walls. Above ground, night settles over the island like a blanket. The stars continue their strange, quick, slow rotation. The ticking sound that has been following them for days seems to soften, as if time itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what choice will be made. Tinkerbell appears, her light dimmer than usual. She flies to Peter and lands on his shoulder, making soft chiming sounds that might be words of comfort. Even the temperamental fairy understands that something important is shifting. Peter reaches up and lets Tinkerbell climb onto his finger, holding her close to his face. For a moment, boy and fairy share something wordless, some communication about loss and loyalty and the pain of letting go. Wendy makes her decision. She will return to London and she will take John and Michael with her. But she will come back to visit if Peter will allow it. She will keep the window open in her own life, leave space for magic and wonder and impossible things. She will not forget Neverland or the Lost Boys or Peter Pan, and she will tell stories to keep their memory alive in the world beyond the stars. Peter nods, not trusting himself to speak. He agrees to take them home when morning comes. One last flight across the night sky, retracing the path they took when everything was new and exciting. He will make sure they reach their window safely, will watch them climb inside, and then he will return to his island alone, as he has done countless times before with other children who eventually chose home over forever. The Lost Boys crowd around Wendy for a final story, knowing these may be their last moments with her. She tells them about a boy who could fly, and an island where dreams lived, and children who were brave enough to have adventures, but wise enough to know when adventures should end. She tells them that growing up doesn't mean forgetting magic, only learning to carry it differently. And she promises, though promises are dangerous things in Neverland, that she will hold them in her heart always. As her words fade into the darkness, the underground home feels both fuller and emptier than it ever has. Every ending is also a beginning, but that does not make endings hurt any less. The children drift toward sleep, holding tight to these final moments, trying to press them into memory like flowers preserved between pages. For the first time, the word home felt heavier than flight, and the weight of it was both burden and blessing, pulling them back toward the world where time moves forward and children eventually grow up and windows wait for those who left to come home again.
Chapter 9. Morning comes too quickly and too slowly, the way important days always do. Wendy wakes to find Peter already awake, sitting by the entrance to the underground home, staring up at the circle of sky visible through the tree roots. He looks smaller somehow, more like an actual boy and less like the eternal spirit of youth he usually appears to be. The Lost Boys are subdued as they prepare breakfast. No one speaks much. The usual morning chaos of wrestling and laughing and competing for attention is absent. They move quietly around the underground home, each boy processing the coming loss in his own way. Toodles keeps touching Wendy's hand as if to make sure she is still solid. Slightly tries to memorize her face. The twins stay close together, drawing comfort from their twinship. After breakfast, which no one eats very much of, Peter announces it is time to leave. The Lost Boys follow them up to the surface, emerging into a Neverland morning that looks achingly beautiful. Sunlight filters through the trees in golden shafts. Birds sing their complex melodies. Flowers bloom in impossible colors. The island is showing off, displaying all its wonders one last time, as if trying to convince the children to stay. But Wendy has made her choice, and she holds firm to it, even as doubt whispers in the back of her mind.
John and Michael stand close to her, ready to leave, but also sad about it. They have grown to love this place, despite its dangers and strangeness. Saying goodbye to magic is harder than any of them anticipated. The Lost Boys line up solemnly. Each one approaches Wendy for a final embrace. Slightly gives her a small carved figure he made, a rough wooden bird that fits in her palm. Toodles presents her with a perfect seashell, pink and white and smooth. Nibs offers a necklace strung with unusual seeds that glow faintly in the shadows. Curly simply hugs her tightly and whispers, "Thank you." The twins give her a handkerchief they embroidered together, their stitches uneven but sincere. Wendy accepts each gift with tears streaming down her face. She tells them how brave they are, how special, how she will carry them in her heart forever. She makes them promise to take care of each other, to keep telling stories, even without her there to start them. The boys promise, though their voices shake, and several of them are crying openly now. Peter stands apart from this farewell, his face carefully blank. He has learned over his long existence not to show too much emotion when children leave. It hurts less that way, or at least he has convinced himself it does. But Wendy sees through his mask. She walks over to him and takes his hand, a small hand that has never grown and never will. "Thank you," she tells him simply. "Thank you for showing me Neverland, for letting me fly, for trusting me with your lost boys. Thank you for letting me go home, even though you want me to stay." That last gift, the gift of her freedom, is the greatest thing he could give her, and she wants him to know she understands its value. Peter looks at her with eyes that are ancient and young simultaneously. He tries to speak, but cannot find words. Instead, he just squeezes her hand once, hard, then releases it and steps back. Tinkerbell appears and sprinkles fairy dust over Wendy, John, and Michael, the golden powder settling on their shoulders like tiny stars. The children rise slowly into the air, their feet lifting from Neverland soil for the last time. They fly up through the canopy of trees, the lost boys watching from below with hands raised in farewell. The boys grow smaller as Wendy and her brothers climb higher, becoming distant figures among the green forest, then tiny dots, then invisible entirely. Wendy looks back one last time and sees Neverland spread out beneath her, the mountains and rivers and beaches all laid out like a map of her dreams. Peter flies beside them, silent and focused on the journey ahead. They travel back the way they came, soaring over the sparkling sea and through clouds that taste like morning mist. The flight feels different now, tinged with sadness and finality. When they flew to Neverland, everything was possibility and excitement. Flying home feels like closing a book, ending a story, stepping out of a dream into waking life. The stars guide them onward, the same stars that whispered welcome when they first arrived. Now the stars seem to be saying goodbye, farewell, go safely. The second star to the right shines especially bright, marking their path across the impossible distance between worlds. Time behaves strangely during the journey, stretching and compressing. Hours pass, or perhaps only minutes. The sky shifts through colors that have no names. Finally, London appears on the horizon. The city spreads out below them, gray and smoky and familiar. Church spires point upward. The Thames winds through the streets like a silver ribbon. Thousands of houses clustered together, each one containing ordinary people living ordinary lives. After Neverland's magic, London looks dull and colorless, but it also looks safe and real and wonderfully, beautifully home. Peter guides them to their nursery window, which still stands open exactly as they left it. He hovers outside while the children climb through, their feet touching the wooden floor of their bedroom. Everything inside is unchanged. Their beds are neatly made. Their toys sit on shelves. The clock on the wall ticks steadily, marking time that actually moves forward instead of spiraling in circles. Wendy turns back to say a final goodbye to Peter, but he is already pulling away. He gives her one last smile, sad and sweet and accepting. Then he turns and flies off into the pre-dawn darkness, moving fast as if running from something painful. Tinkerbell follows, her light growing dimmer with distance until it vanishes completely. The sky lightens toward dawn, and Peter Pan is gone. The children stand at the window for a long moment, looking out at the ordinary London morning. A milk cart rattles down the street. A cat meows from a nearby garden. Life continues exactly as it did before, unaware that 3 children just returned from an impossible place. John closes the window gently, and the soft click of the latch sounds final, like the last word of a story being spoken aloud. They climb into their beds, suddenly exhausted. Sleep reaches for them with soft hands. As Wendy's eyes close, she wonders if tomorrow she will remember this all as a dream. Will the details fade? Will she doubt it ever happened? She clutches Slightly's carved bird in one hand and the twins' handkerchief in the other, holding tight to proof that Neverland was real. Her last thought before sleep claims her completely is a simple one. She thinks the words, "Goodbye, Peter," sending them out into the universe like a prayer or a promise. Somewhere far away, perhaps he hears them. Perhaps he thinks of her too, the girl who came and stayed and left, who chose home, but will always carry a piece of Neverland inside her heart. For the first time, the word home felt heavier than flight, but the weight was welcome, pulling her down into rest and peace and the sweet certainty of being exactly where she belonged.
Chapter 10. Wendy wakes to sunlight streaming through the nursery window, warm and golden and perfectly ordinary. For a moment, she lies still, caught between sleep and waking, unsure which world she belongs to. Then her mother's voice drifts up from downstairs, calling them to breakfast, and reality settles around her like a familiar blanket. She sits up slowly and looks around the nursery. John and Michael are still sleeping in their beds, their faces peaceful and young. Everything looks exactly as it always has. The wallpaper with its pattern of flowers. The shelf with their books arranged by size. The rocking horse in the corner, waiting patiently for someone to ride it. Nothing has changed, yet everything feels different somehow. Wendy opens her hand and finds slightly carved bird still clutched in her palm. The wood is smooth and real, proof that she did not imagine everything. She looks at John's bed and sees the seashell from Toodles resting on his nightstand. On Michael's pillow lies the glowing seed necklace from Nibs. The gifts are real. The adventure was real. Neverland exists somewhere beyond the stars, and she truly went there. Her mother appears in the doorway, smiling her usual morning smile. She comments on how soundly the children slept, how she checked on them 3 times during the night and they never stirred once. She asks if they had pleasant dreams. Wendy says yes, though the word dream does not feel quite right for what she experienced. Adventures that feel more real than real life deserve a different name. The days that follow fall into familiar patterns: breakfast and lessons, and afternoon walks in the park, dinner with their parents, and evening stories before bed. The routine that once felt confining now feels comforting. Wendy finds herself appreciating small, ordinary things she never noticed before. The way her mother hums while sewing, how her father laughs at his own jokes, the warmth of tea on a cold afternoon. These simple moments carry their own quiet magic. But Neverland has not released her completely. At night, Wendy dreams of flying. She soars through impossible skies, visits the Lost Boys in their underground home, listens to mermaids singing in crystal lagoons. The dreams are vivid and detailed, more like memories than imagination. She wakes from them with tears on her face and an ache in her chest that has no name. John handles the transition differently. He throws himself into his studies, reading every book about geography and astronomy he can find. He draws maps constantly, trying to chart the route they flew from London to Neverland. He measures angles and calculates distances, applying logic to something that defied logic. His notebooks fill with equations and diagrams, attempts to make sense of magic through mathematics. Michael, being youngest, adapts most easily. He plays with his toys and makes up stories and sings songs from both worlds mixed together. Sometimes Wendy catches him talking to someone invisible, and she suspects he is chatting with Peter or the Lost Boys, keeping the connection alive through imagination. When she asks who he is talking to, Michael just smiles and says, "Friends," as if it is the most natural thing in the world. The room stays open every night. Their mother comments on this, puzzled why the window will not stay latched, but she stops fighting it eventually. Cold air drifts in through the seasons. Spring breeze is carrying flower scents, summer warmth, autumn's crisp chill, winter frost that paints patterns on the glass. Through all of this, the window remains open, waiting patiently for something or someone. Wendy checks the window every night before sleep, looking out at the London sky. She searches for a small flying figure or a trail of golden fairy dust. She listens for the sound of boyish laughter carried on the wind. Mostly she sees only ordinary things, stars that stay in their proper places, clouds drifting past, the moon making its predictable journey across the sky. But sometimes, just sometimes, she catches something out of her corner of eye, a shadow that moves wrong, a distant laugh that sounds impossibly familiar. Time passes the way time does in the real world, steadily forward without loops or circles. Weeks become months, seasons turn. The children grow older in small increments that add up. John's voice deepens. Michael loses baby teeth and grows new ones. Wendy notices she is taller, that her favorite dress has become too short. They're growing up, moving away from childhood at the inexorable pace that all children must. One evening, Wendy tells her parents about Neverland. She describes the island and the Lost Boys and Peter Pan as carefully as she can, trying to make them understand it was real. Her father listens with an indulgent smile, clearly thinking she is sharing an elaborate story. Her mother's expression is more complicated, a mix of concern and something that might be memory or recognition. She touches Wendy's hand gently and says that
Some experiences live in a space between dream and reality, and those experiences are precious, even if we cannot prove them to others. Wendy continues telling stories to her brothers and to neighborhood children who gather to hear her speak. The stories about Neverland become mixed with other tales, blending together until it's hard to say which parts are memory and which are embellishment. Peter Pan appears in her stories, sometimes as a real boy she once knew, sometimes as a spirit of youth itself, sometimes as an idea about freedom and imagination. All versions are true in their own way. Years pass, the nursery becomes just a bedroom. Toys are put away, books change from picture stories to serious volumes. The children become young adults with responsibilities and plans for the future. John studies navigation and dreams of becoming a sea captain, drawn to water and stars in ways he cannot fully explain. Michael becomes a teacher, wanting to fill other children's minds with wonder and possibility. Wendy writes stories, trying to capture magic in words. But through all these changes, through growing up and growing older, Wendy keeps the window open. She keeps watch for a boy who never ages, who flies through the night on adventures that never end. She does not expect him to return. She knows that Peter belongs to Neverland now, that he has other children to visit in their dreams, other windows to fly past in the darkness. But she keeps faith anyway, maintaining the connection in case he ever needs a reminder that someone remembers, someone believes, someone keeps the story alive. On Wendy's 20th birthday, she stands at the nursery window looking out at the night sky. She is a young woman now, grown up in all the ways that matter. She has dreams and ambitions that have nothing to do with flying or pirates or magical islands. She has accepted that childhood ends and life moves forward, and some adventures exist only in memory and imagination. But acceptance does not mean forgetting. She whispers into the darkness, addressing words to someone who may or may not hear them. "I remember," she says. "I still remember everything. The way the fairy dust felt like starlight on my skin. How the mermaids sang in voices that made you want to swim into deep water. The sound of the lost boys laughing around the fire. Your face when you told us we could fly. I remember, Peter. I will always remember." The night gives no obvious answer, but somewhere far away, in a place between sleep and waking, between dreams and reality, between childhood and whatever comes after, a boy pauses in his endless flight. He hovers over an island that exists outside of time, listening to words carried on winds that blow between worlds. He smiles his eternal smile, young and wild and free, knowing that as long as one person remembers, Neverland remains real. And in that moment, Wendy feels something shift, a lightness in her chest, a whisper of possibility. She cannot see Peter or touch Neverland, but she knows with absolute certainty that the connection remains. The window between worlds stays open, not just physically, but spiritually, a doorway in the heart that allows magic to visit even those who have grown too old to fly. She closes her eyes and feels the wind on her face, and for just a heartbeat, just the space of a single breath, she is flying again. She soars above London towards horizons painted in dawn colors. She returns to the place where dreams take form and children never grow old. Then the moment passes, and she opens her eyes to find herself standing in an ordinary bedroom in an ordinary city, her feet firmly on the ground. But the smile on her face is anything but ordinary. It is the smile of someone who has touched magic and carries it forward, who has lived impossible adventures and remembers them truly, who knows that growing up does not mean giving up, that imagination survives beyond childhood, that some windows remain forever open to those brave enough to believe. She climbs into bed and drifts towards sleep, and her dreams are full of stars and laughter
and the sound of wings cutting through the night air. Tomorrow, she will wake and be practical and responsible and all the things adults must be. But tonight, in the space between waking and sleeping, she returns once more to Neverland, where Peter Pan still flies on, still laughing, still dreaming, still never growing old, waiting patiently for the next child who dares to believe in second stars to the right and straight on till morning.